Hello again, this is Alex, and I've got a bunch of Gallic warriors to show off to you today. I put about 40 Gauls, all in the same base, all Victrix 28mm figures. The plan today is to show you this new unit, discuss how I did it, and then I'll have a little historical discussion, and I'll recommend some military historians that you can watch on YouTube. Alright, and here they are. So here we have Gallic Warband. They're forming a strong line of shields in the front. Yeah, I think they look great. This is the densest shield wall I've ever made. I've got 12 warriors in the front rank here. That's about 2 more, I think, than my densest formation that I've done so far. The frontage here is about 19 centimeters. And I love the visual effect of just that really dense formation of men. I think it looks great. So yeah, I think it looks great, especially from the front. You know, if these guys were coming straight at you, I think it'd be very intimidating. And I think the Romans and the Greeks were very intimidated by these guys, despite all their tough talk. So there are 39 men total, and you know, there aren't any clear ranks except maybe in the front. And the depth is a little bit, it's a little bit deeper than I normally do. So let me give you another unit here for comparison for depth. Don't have the exact measurements, but you can see that it's significantly deeper than the Libyan spearmen that I've got here. And this is about the same depth as a cavalry base that I did for those Carthaginian citizen cavalry. Now let's talk about the materials and the method. I didn't use any color scheme for this warband. I simply tried to avoid purple. That was about it. And you'll notice about half the figures are shirtless and the other half have tunics. And that's driven by the structure of the kit itself. That's just the way the warriors come in the Victrix kit. Additionally, what I tried to do here was alternate both a light and darker shade paint with a more colorful and a less colorful paint. So I'm alternating in 2 different ways. When it comes to shade, there's a good example here, a very simple example where I have a light beige pair of pants and dark belt, dark boots. Right, so you get that nice contrast between the belt and the pants and even the skin as well. The belt works off well with the skin. Another example here is this guy with the black tunic who has a nice tan belt. Now, you know, I didn't just simply go through and paint all the belts on my guys the same color. You can do that if you want, but I was looking to kind of customize it and give each individual unit or individual man their own style. And that was just one way I did it and tried to make it visually appealing. Just, you know, nothing profound here, just a realization from me on how I've been painting. Now I still, you know, standardize my armor to a certain extent. Like, you know, here I've got basically just two types of metal helmets. There's a little bit of variability in the iron, but you know, I've got the bronze and the steel helmets here. So, you know, I do still kind of standardize on materials a bit, but I've been trying to break away from that and give custom looks for each soldier. When it comes to the skin tones, I used a peach skin tone called kind of Flat Flesh here by Vallejo. Sorry, here it is. Just to give these guys a bit of a more northern look than the other Mediterranean units that I've been making so far. And you know, I finish it off with a nice light brown wash after putting that on to give them their current skin tone right now. Now the shield transfers. The shield transfers come from battle flags. Yeah, battle flags, water slides. It's a water slide shield transfer, not the Little Big Men Studio. Well, I think there might be a couple in here. A couple hand-painted ones as well. But they're a little bit more difficult, I think, than the Little Big Man sticker shield transfers, but they get the job done. They have nice patterns. A little finicky. You gotta take your time with it. It's a skill in the hobby into and of itself, getting those on without breaking them. But I'll get better at it. And I think they turned out pretty well. Okay, now let me talk about the basing. So for this base, this is the first time I used a texture paint. This one here from Pro Acryl, nice dark brown earth, instead of a natural sand on glue base, such as the one here, which I put a bright sand on and then I wash it with a light brown wash, then add some tufts. So I think I might alternate between the two approaches depending on the look that I'm going for. But it was a little bit more difficult for me here with these guys. And the reason for that is that it was hard for me to get the texture paint down between the soldiers. And the way I do this, if you remember from last video, is that I really focus primarily, when I'm basing these figures, I focus primarily on their positioning. And I'm trying to get them situated and spaced together in such a way that it really communicates the character of the unit. And that's honestly, that's one of my favorite parts of this, because this group of plastic figures just comes alive when you place them in a unit like this. So I think the organization is extremely important, and that's my focus when I put these miniatures down. So I get them all glued on the bases first, and then I worry about basing material. And you can see that, if you're going to do that, it's really hard to get to get a brush between these little gaps here. Like, let me show you. Like, imagine trying to get a brush between here to get that space. It's quite difficult. You can kind of go a little bit from the other side here. But still, that's a tricky proposition, and you're easily going to get some excess paint on the guy's shirts and trousers and shields, and it takes a while to clean up that sort of thing. So if you have any recommendations on how I can do this better, please put them in the comments. I'm looking for advice here. One idea is that, perhaps I could start laying them down man by man, and then doing the basing simultaneously as I'm laying them down. That's one option. I'm a little worried about still getting the unit to look the way that I want it to when I'm doing it that way, but I'm interested in your thoughts and ideas on this, because it can be kind of tricky to get these bases down when you have such a dense formation of men. Okay, next let's talk about the character of the unit. Now, this unit represents a tribal contingent of Celtic warriors. And they're supposed to be all free men with investments in the tribe, with standing in the tribe, able to bear spear and shield. And I want this unit to be characteristic of the Cisalpine Gauls, the Gauls in northern Italy, such as the ones that fought for Hannibal during the Second Punic War. Or perhaps even the Gauls who fought the Romans beforehand, such as in 225 BC in that war that Polybius relates. So that they're all, like an allied contingent in the Carthaginian army, fighting here with the men that they've known since birth. These are not mercenaries; they are raised to fight in the interest of the tribe, perhaps for their homes. So let's go over the key figures in the grouping here. So you'll see in back, there's this very old guy in gray with a full beard. Everyone else just has mustaches. That's very characteristic Celtic facial hair, is the mustache. And Victrix, of course, follows that in their kit. So his ragged appearance reveals what I think of as an eccentric mind. He's completely high right now, urging the men forward with barely coherent rambling and exhortations. And next to him is a man bearing the Celtic war horn, the Carnyx. And it is surprisingly beautiful if you hear it played. I'll link a video in the description. So we're in the back now, and as you move closer to the front, you'll notice that there are a few men, there's a few men here back here tossing javelins and such, but there's also men just kind of shouting encouragement to the men next to them. Sorry, it's just this guy right here. And I think, some of these guys are shouting a bit too loudly, like deep down, they wouldn't want to get near the front line. And they're shouting so loudly, and they're trying to hide their shame and fear. So they're just shouting louder to make themselves appear like they're actually in the fight, like they could actually go to the front ranks, but they're not going to get near the front ranks. They'll be the first to flee. And the Gauls, they're, at least from a Roman point of view, they have had some epic collapses of morale in recorded history. So yeah, that could potentially lead to immeasurable slaughter here if those guys start running. So the bravest men have pushed to the front to form a dense spear wall here. And I'm calling it an emergent phalanx, if you will. It wasn't planned. They're each just trying to get to the front and get at the men. At least the bravest are trying to get to the front and get at the men in front of them, the enemy. So they're not minding their spacing. They're not disciplined warriors. You can see on the left how we have a couple of very eager men here trying to attack through and past the guys in the front rank, just kind of wailing their spears out there. Probably not very successfully, but they're eager, those guys in the front. All right, now in the center here you have this armored fellow carrying the Gallic boar standard. And he's one of the local leaders. He's currently bearing the standard for the warband, but he'll get into the thick of it if it calls for him to. And directly in front of him are the two champions of the tribe here. Let's see if I can get that focused. There we go. Yeah, two champions right here. The most prominent men, I think, in the warband. I think they'd be distinguished either by their bravery in fighting shirtless, like this guy on the left, or perhaps due to their past experience, like this guy here on the right. He has a linen armor that he won from his mercenary history. He once served as a mercenary for the Greeks. Now he's back in the tribe, bearing a nice lenothorax. And you'll also note that he is just a massive man. He's much taller than the guys next to him. So he's a very intimidating, prototypical Gaul. All right, now, if you look at the formation closely, notice that there's a few cases where spears or swords are very close to delicate spots. Like, say, this guy's hand here is very close to that spear right behind him. So if he really wailed on his spear and pulled it back, he would cut himself on the spear behind him. Similarly, this guy's got his sword kind of hanging out there in a kind of a dangerous position. Not really sure what he's going to do with that sword. I'm not sure how realistic this is, how careful these men would be when they formed such a close unit like this. And, if that would be unrealistic or not. Now, in my first video introducing my army of Carthaginians in 28mm, by the way, that video, I never expected it to get 1,000 views. Thank you everyone for watching it. I really am quite surprised, but in it I talk about the scene from Caesar's The Gallic War. Great scene. So he describes his battle with the Helvetii, a Celtic tribe. And this takes place in about 58 BC. And it's a very famous scene. It's the first time he describes a pitched battle in his book. And so the Helvetii were fighting the Romans, and they formed into a really tight formation of men. And it's translated as a phalanx by Carolyn Hammond. And she's the translator for the edition of the book I'm reading. And the Romans broke this phalanx by casting their pila, their heavy javelins, at them. And the Gauls' shields were encumbered by this and even stapled together. So they're fighting so close together that their shields were stapled together by the casting of these heavy Roman javelins. And I was really struck by that. So afterwards, Caesar says that his men hard-pressed them, and some of the Gauls were even forced to fight without a shield. And when Caesar said this, what I'm kind of thinking he's saying is that these Gauls have a native ferocity to them, and they were crazy enough to try to fight his men without shields. You know, the thought, how crazy that would be. Anyway, it didn't go well for the Gauls. They were forced to retire to a nearby hill that was less than a mile away. And that sounds an awful lot to me like an ordered retreat, like they didn't just break and run. And it's not a popular description of the Gauls or barbarian infantry that you would see in popular media. It sounds like the Romans were fighting a bunch of classical Greek citizen hoplites. That's kind of what it sounds like to me. Anyway, that was the inspiration for this unit. One of the inspirations for this unit. And I know that the Gallic Wars take place about 150 to 200 years after the time period that I'm building my army around, but I'm still using that as inspiration. But at the same time, it also kind of makes the Gauls sound like a bunch of amateurs. Like, you know, didn't they see this coming? Didn't they know how the Romans fight? Aren't the Romans' methods of war known to them? And, you know, did they not read their Polybius? So maybe there's just like a natural inclination of men fighting in this manner to kind of huddle close together into a dense formation. However, like the Iberians, they didn't fight like this. They preferred looser, fluid combat. So, anyway, those are my thoughts on that. So the men in my unit aren't quite close enough to have overlapping shields, but let's consider, you know, hypothetically, let's consider what would happen if a Roman were to cast a javelin into this line. Okay? So I think that at least the two men closest to the javelin's trajectory, they're likely to see it coming, and the natural reaction is going to be to catch that thing with your shield. Right? Like, you're going to want to stop that thing from hurting you. And maybe you'd be trying to expertly deflect it, or maybe just you're going to run instinct, stick your shield out, and try to stop the javelin. So even if one of these soldiers, one of the two, if they were standing perfectly still and the javelin would just like pass by them like a few inches, and a normal person is not going to do that. They're going to block anything that comes near them, right? You're not going to stand perfectly still as a javelin passes inches by your face. Now you're going to stick out your shield and you're going to catch that thing. And you're probably, in the course of doing this, you're going to bump into your opponent's shield who's doing the same thing. And I think easily your shields can get stapled together by the pilum as it punches through both of your shields. Now the guy behind you, and if you're in the front rank, the guy behind you in the second rank, if he sees that javelin coming, he's probably going to stick out his shield too. And if the javelin is, the pilum is cast strong enough, you know, maybe it's got enough oomph to stick through that guy's shield as well. So I think that's a plausible way where you would have, you know, Gallic infantry getting their shields stapled together by Roman pila, even if they're not standing in the super dense overlapping shield formation like you'd see in a movie. Even if they were standing in maybe this type of formation, how they would still get their shields stapled together. Anyhow, that's my theory. So next, I'll provide you some recommendations for historians. So I've been watching a lot of videos from Adrian Goldsworthy's YouTube channel, which I'll link in the description. He's a British novelist and a historian and a foreign professor. He's great. He also appears on other people's YouTube channels, so you should look into those interviews as well. His videos are very entertaining and honest. He's got this great speaking style. He kind of meanders around sometimes, always talking about interesting things, but not necessarily related to the topic at hand. So he's not like presenting really clear theses. He's not doing like really organized lectures, which is great. But his videos are very long, so I like to put them on when I paint. Highly recommend him. Yeah, he talks about sources, interpretations, and he's very honest about what we know and what we don't. Another huge plus in my mind for him. And those, you know, that meandering style that I was telling you about, I think that adds some nice character to his videos. Another recommendation is Bret Devereaux, in particular his appearance on the Hellenic History podcast, which is one of the successor podcasts to Mike Duncan's History of Rome podcast. But I'll provide a link in the description to this particular video that I'm talking about. He's describing the mid-Republican Roman army, and he's trying to describe why they were so successful, how they defeated the successor kingdom so easily. He's a professor from the States. He's got a very popular blog, and he's just got excellent delivery. And he can say things very profoundly and succinctly. So I think he's very entertaining. I recommend the video very much. He's also pretty good about qualifying things, when we don't have much information, which I think is extremely important. It's also, it's standard practice for academia, though, so, that's to be expected, I think, but I still appreciate it. Okay, well, thank you for listening today, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Up next, I think I'll get started on some Republican Romans. Paint some guys up so I can go conquer the known world. All right. Have a good day. Thank you for listening.